Hey everyone, welcome to Love, Rinse, Repeat, a podcast recorded on the unceded sovereign lands of the Gayo-Muggle people by me, Liam Miller, he, him. He's a minister in the Uniting Church in Australia. My guest today is Ali Robinson. Ali, welcome along.
Hi, Liam. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting. So for those who don't know, Dr. Ali Robinson holds a PhD from Macquarie University with a BTH with honours from Charles Sturt University. She is currently teaching New Testament at United Theological College. She is also the author of Jude on the Attack, which sounds very exciting. A comparative analysis of the Epistle of Jude, Jewish Judgment Oracles, and Greco-Roman Invective, which was published with T&T Clark in 2018. She is currently researching that harsh rhetoric in 2 Peter and the Gospel of Matthew. So we might have to get into this, what's drawing you to all this harsh rhetoric and attack and strong language. Something's going on and you're excited about, but we might come to it.
I'm Italian. I love, the really big emotions.
Those who aren't watching the video, those who are just listening to the podcast, won't see that Ali was literally doing the stereotypical
Italian hands
at that time. So before we get to, I guess, that side of things, I guess the question, Ali, is which I often ask folks at kind of an opening foray, is what got you passionate and interested in the New Testament in such a way that it would become your career? Because it's not inevitable that anyone becomes passionate about the New Testament to begin with, let alone passionate in this way that it becomes their job and vocation.
Yes,
and such.
yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you said inevitable, because it definitely wasn't something that I set out, left school and was I am going to become a New Testament lecturer. Definitely was not on the cards. In fact, when I went to my first university, when I finished school, I did a performing arts degree, and that's where I met my now husband. And when we were finishing up that degree, he said to me, "Oh, what would you like to do next?" And I was like, "Oh, I would love to study the Bible, but how do you do that?" And he was like, "There are places where you can go to study the Bible called Bible colleges." So that's how little I thought it was possible to become a New Testament lecturer. So
are there desert communities where you go and live in huts of some description?
I just did not know that existed, Bible colleges. And so I grew up in a Christian household, but I became a Christian at uni in my first degree. And so, it just wasn't on my radar of things. And I'm also dyslexic and have ADHD as well. So I like reading. I didn't read my first book until I was 21. So, so it just was not on the radar. But I went to Bible college and I thought, this is amazing. My world was changed. I just thought, this is incredible. I want to know more about this. It was like this book that up until that point had seemed very almost 2D, almost like not real, almost like a cartoon kind of thing, And then as I was listening to the different lecturers, Old Testament, New Testament theology, all of it, church history, I was like, wow, the whole world of the New Testament became real, tangible, actual real people. The world of the Bible was whoa, that was a real place that people actually walked and talked. And I didn't think I had that concept before, but going to Bible college, and I was like, wow, more people need to know this. Other people are out there that have had my experience, and they need to, know that the Bible is exciting and there's things in it for them. And, so I think that it just grew very slowly. I started off in a diploma of, New Testament diploma of theology, and then just sort of was oh, this is cool, I'll move to the bachelor. Oh, I'll go to the honors. It just grew like that. So it wasn't a plan, but obviously it was God's plan, but I hadn't set out to do that. So it just sort of happened.
That's really fascinating. It's funny, we share some similarities in that I also did a BFA in performing arts stuff, and then also worked at Macquarie University, so we have some crossover in places
living parallel lives. I know. Well, the performing arts stuff is sort of this funny part of my world that I think, oh, was that me? It's but then it's interesting because it obviously prepares you in ways that you don't realize as well, to teach and things like that. So it definitely was helpful, but I do some sort of look back and go, it was almost like another part of me.
I understand that feeling. So you talked a bit then about how, like, one of the things that you love about and why you wanted to do this was I want more people to, see that this is not two-dimensional, that this is, a whole world that you can walk into and be shaped by. So I guess, I was curious about, like, what are some of the things that really are rewarding or continue to draw you back in the act of teaching New Testament to folks, whether in the actual formal classroom setting or otherwise. What are some of those things that really, like,
because I do, like, it's interesting you said and otherwise, because I love preaching as well. I love sort of bringing the text out and applying it to people's lives. So it's not just teaching. But I think what I love about the classroom is that you kind of have to lay all your preconceptions at the door. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of, at the beginning of the course, I'll ask people, like, for instance, I did Paul in his letters at the beginning of the year. I kind of went round and was like, okay, what are you all bringing to this? What are your preconceptions of Paul? Be honest, because my preconception is, like, he's a jerk. Do you know what I mean? Like, before teaching the class. And so I was like, be honest, we've got to lay that down, and now we're going to start to rebuild and sort of go, okay, what was actually going on at the time, in the context? Let's try and understand, get into Paul's mind, get into the first century, and strip away some of those preconceptions that can be a little bit unhelpful. So that's exciting. That's exciting to see light bulbs go off in people's minds, to see some of those unhelpful things be stripped away, and so I love that. And I think for me, because I am a Christian, I think the Bible does bring so much hope and life. And so there is this beautiful part of my job where it's like they're not just learning information. It's meant to be life-changing. It's meant to shape them as people, their character, how they go out into the world, how they serve in their community, their actual relationship with God. So there's this, in my mind, I'm like, is there anything better to study? I don't think so. You know what I mean? And one of my colleagues said, we had our big annual meeting across, because the School of Theology goes across 5 different campuses. And so one of my colleagues in Hong Kong said last week that one of the things he loves is that we're not just educators. We are there to inspire these, students for discovery, for their own discovery. We're there so that they can go, oh, wow, like, he's a Hebrew scholar. So to be like, oh, I'd like to, contribute to, understanding the Bible in its original language, or I'd like to contribute in whatever your field is. But it's like this idea of inspiring, not just imparting information. Yeah. So for me, it's very multifaceted, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. Thank you. When you're talking about, some of that stripping away of those common misconceptions, I guess, I'm often thinking, like, I'm sure once you probably teach more than like 3 classes, probably a lot of common misconceptions reveal themselves as common, right? Reveal themselves as emerging again and again.
Yeah.
And I guess let's imagine there's a handful of people who are listening to this who might at some stage walk into a New Testament class or start considering how they read the New Testament. If there were one or a couple of those, like, real common misconceptions that you just want to, like, let's just sweep a couple away right now. Save yourself some time in a later day, man. What might those be?
So it really depends on the context. So, like, as in, so I actually attend a fairly progressive Sydney Anglican church, and so it doesn't. That my particular church doesn't sort of fall into this sort of category. But I know that other Sydney Anglican churches, for instance, it's sort of a no-brainer. Women can't preach, for instance, and so I will speak to friends, to other people in that sort of sphere. And it's sort of, even their parishioners, it's sort of a no-brainer. Yeah, well, that's what the Bible says. And I want to be like, wait, what? Like, can we dive into that a little bit, please? Because every letter that Paul wrote had a context, and there's some big sweeping statements there that we need to sort of just push to the side. You know what I mean? So there's stuff like that you're like, wow, like, it's just ingrained. They just think that's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says is a very unhelpful phrase, I think, because a sentence, a phrase can mean so many different things in a different context, right? like the tone, what, like, is it is it ironic, is it, you know, sarcastic, is it, you know, what like, yeah, that's what the Bible says I find really difficult, and I'd like to just whoosh that one away.
That's a good one. Yeah, I'm with you now.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go to where we kind of hinted that we'd start with in some of your work on Jude and maybe some of your current work, and particularly on I guess Jude on the attack and this, you know, looking at rhetoric and harsh language and the like. What got you into this project? What got you first excited to go like, Jude, that's what I'm gonna hang out in Jude? Which again doesn't seem inevitable.
My honest answer is twofold. One, it's really small, so I was like, smart. That's great. I can hold it in like my hand and be like, that's what I have to study, because I'm dyslexic. I really struggle with kind of those big books where I've got to hold so much together. So it was small, and two, there's less written on it, so I was like, great, I'll have less that I have to read. Smashing it. Less scholarship to read.
This is smart. This is working smarter, not harder. I love it.
I was like, I'm not going to get into Romans, too much to read. Oh, wow. But the other real big thing was that when I was doing my honours, I was down in Canberra with John Painter, and I was looking at Jude and 1 Enoch, and I just had a lot of questions like around sort of, I don't know, why would a New Testament writer use a book outside the Bible, you know, in their writings? And there was just so much I didn't understand and didn't know. And I feel like Jude is one of those books that just has so many weird references and weird language that it is kind of just pushed to the side a little bit, you know, as like, it's just a bit strange. We don't really understand it. And I'm like, it's in there for a reason. I want to know more about this book, you know? So the honest answer is because I had less to read, but also because it is just a really strange book. And I thought, like, you know, yeah, I just want to know more about this book. Like, what are these images? What is this? As I said, it's in there for a reason. Why doesn't it have the same sort of place in people's minds, particularly in the church, you know, than say one of Paul's letters or some other letter? Why isn't it one that people think about and read? And what is that? Why is there this kind of hierarchy of New Testament letters?
Particularly, it's not like we put a lot of weight on some small letters like Philemon and some of the 1, 2, 3 John, or maybe less. But like, you know, the short
1
letters
John
that people pay attention to.
That's right. That's right. Or even James, like Jude's brother, like he gets lots of attention, you know, but Jude just got left out. But it was interesting to me, like, why did that happen? Why do some letters get attention and some don't? Like, what is that? And how do we kind of bring it back into focus?
Why is it you think it happened for Jude? Like, I mean, you give us the full like dissertation answer, but
I think it did happen for Jude because of these strange images, and I think that for a little while people were hesitant of some of these external sources that Jude used, and I think that over the course of history, so at the very, very beginning of like when Bibles were being sort of canonized and put together, all the different letters, there were some Bibles where these, what we call Catholic epistles, as in James through to Jude, were at the front. So it's kind of like Gospels and then them. Do you know what I mean? Right. As opposed to going into Paul. So that in some collections, they were given importance because James was like the head of the Jerusalem church. He was like a really important figure in the early church. But then in other circles, Paul just seemed to get elevated, and the Catholics just sort of got, when I say Catholic epistles, I mean general epistles, just kind of got pushed to the side. So it just, and then particularly around the Reformation, obviously Paul became king, and then and then everything else, I mean, just fell to the side, you know. So I think it has a lot to do with sort of church history. Interesting.
So having spent some time with Jude, I'm imagining a listener who, I don't know if we have any listeners who are doing a read a Bible in a year thing, but we're getting toward the end of the year, but you might be getting close to Jude if you were doing such a project. If you were like, just whether it's that person or whether it's anyone who thinks to pick up Jude, I don't even know if Jude appears in the lectionary, right? I don't think I've ever preached on it, so you might never have to. But let's imagine someone is maybe inspired by this conversation or just in general coming to it. What would be any kind of guiding word or advice you would offer as you kind of seek to pick that up to get the most out of what is there?
Yeah. I think the main thing when you read Jude, like, it does seem quite aggressive the way he speaks. And so hence the title of my book being Jude on the Attack. Like, he really is on the attack. But what he's trying to do is he wants to almost like he's speaking to two people at once. He's speaking to the beloved, the people in the community who have held true to the faith. And he's kind of on the side, not directly, indirectly speaking to these people who are leading the congregation astray. And he's kind of, indirectly rebuking them, like, stop, leading them astray kind of thing. So that's kind of where the aggression comes in. But I think for Jude, like, he's just so passionate about don't let go of this trust, this gospel, this truth that you held on to in the beginning. And so it's this kind of beautiful, a pastor's heart, like, don't fall astray, don't get swept away by these false teachers. That's really what it's about at the end of the day. But then interestingly, for Jude, like, at the end, he's got this little bit about show mercy to those who are, kind of stumbling, to those who are, being pulled in by the false teachers. Don't reject them, show mercy to them and love to them in the way that Jesus has shown mercy to you. So there's this beautiful kind of, echo back to Jesus' own teaching, just as you have received mercy, show mercy. So, on either side of the rebuke, there's this beautiful, gentle word to the believers, but he's passionate because he doesn't want to see these believers led astray. To him, they're heading towards the fire. That's terrifying, so it's in that context, it's a letter of love, and concern.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's really helpful to know.
And so it's kind of like, it's similar to, some of Paul's ideas in being like, what he's rebuking these false teachers for is that they have rejected Jesus' lordship and they're using grace as a license to do whatever they want, a license to keep on sinning. And so he's saying, let's come back to the gospel and what the gospel is, and not use grace to be like, great, I can live however I want,
Yes, right.
But at the same time, like, I think the other thing that's really important about Jude is it's not legalism. He's not saying like, it's very far from that. He's just saying, like, let's come back to the grace of the gospel, and live out a response from that grace, not use the grace, for selfish gain, basically. Yeah.
That's really great. I was thinking about, this rhetoric and this harsh language, and then you're looking at that obviously with 2 Peter and the Gospel of Matthew as well.
Yeah, I was. Right. I've now paused that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got ADHD brain, so I can't stick on one thing. It's amazing that I finished my PhD.
Yeah, no, kudos. Well, I guess even just from the research that has been done, I was just thinking about, like, so, like, I think about, like, the contemporary, thinking about the church and its relationship to harsh language or kind of like more stinging rhetoric, for instance, like, because there can be two camps. One which seems to just all be about that, right? That's the only way to talk to people is to just attack from the jump, and that's one kind of mode. And then there's another which is kind of, well, actually, we just have to being Christian is to be nice, and we're just generally, pleasant to people. And I was thinking about, what, if anything, you've thought about in the way that we have to approach, like, what place is there for, kind of a harshness, for a rebuke, for, using, quite strong, uncompromising language in dispute within our life today. Like, because, we often, it's there in lots of scripture, right? Like, as you said, Paul does it too, Jesus certainly, but, like, we sometimes go, okay, is it just for that, or is it something that we can utilize or turn to, or is it, but then there's obviously a danger of it becoming so the only mode. Anyway, I just wondered
yeah,
your thoughts there.
yeah. So in the piece, the Matthew piece is around Jesus' rebuke against the Pharisees, right? Woe to the Pharisees, da, da, da. And so what I noticed actually, because I did a bit of looking at the types of invective that we see across the New Testament, and a lot of the time, not always, not exclusively, but a lot of the time, the people that Jesus and others get cross at is the ones who are trying to bring in rules and legalism and things like that. Like even Paul himself, he's like, don't make people like in Galatians, when he gets angry, Galatians is invective as well. He's like, don't try and bring in circumcision, like, don't go back to the law, kind of thing. So actually, one of the things that I think is that it's the gospel plus, you know what I mean? It's when you're adding all these extra things, that's actually where a lot of the invective comes from, Yep. So something me and my husband lead Bible studies. And like something I'll say to the young people is like, what have we added? What have we added to the gospel? How do we strip back? Like, all these additional things. That's where I feel like a lot of the aggression comes from in the New Testament, which is interesting. So, but then holding in tension with that is the fact that, if I just come back to Jude, he says several times throughout the letter, like, it's the Lord who judges. So ultimate judgment belongs to the Lord. Okay, so he's very aware of that. He has this bizarre illustration where he says even the archangel Michael didn't dare to bring a judgment against the devil. Do you know what I mean? So he's like, ultimate judgment is up to Jesus. It's not up to us to judge. But the things he gets passionate about and angry about, and he and others, Jesus, Paul, is about these extra things that get added to the gospel. You have to do this, look this way, Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's often like, I think that, and that's like, then you're thinking about, it's usually in defense then of people who are being, put upon or restricted in a way, or because are being asked to do more than maybe, they should be. And that definitely has parallels to contemporary kind of context.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I was thinking, now this is another question that's just kind of, you might not have an answer here, but I was just thinking about how
probably not.
It's kind of, I guess, a flip of, so you're talking about like that what you want to strip away being in the context of the church you're in, or the denomination that you're connected with. I was thinking also, as someone who's teaching in the Uniting Church College, now obviously folks come from all over to that college from all different kinds of traditions, but Uniting Church College, I was having some connection to those being formed there in ministry as well. But as someone who's kind of, I guess, somewhat also outside looking in, right? Who has different levels of different tradition and commitments and understanding. Are there particular, the flip side of this is what I want to definitely say to a bunch of the other Sydney Anglican churches. This is what, like, if I could talk to a bunch of Uniting Church folk, are there particular things you see as someone who gets that, often when we're a bit outside, you can see things that are missed by those whose noses are right to the grindstone. That you think, you think.
It's interesting you asked that question, because I brought up before about the women's stuff. So that's obviously a big thing in the Anglican Church. Interestingly, when I teach my Paul class at UTC, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to show you why I think women should be involved in ministry. And they kind of all look at me like, but we all think they should. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, yes, but you need to know why you think they should. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to map it for you and basically like help you have a defense of that. Because I think sometimes what I have found or experienced is there is this beautiful sense of inclusion and welcome, which I absolutely love about UTC and about my students and the Uniting Church. And it's one of the things that I'm like, should I be moving over to that camp? There's this beautiful sense of, like, all are welcome, which I think is missing in other denominations. But I don't think there's necessarily that like, and I've thought through why, so let's go through the passages. Let's challenge some of these ideas. I'm going to really push on you. Something I do at the end of that class is make them do a debate where they have to like, argue for things on both sides and kind of make them, say, try and go on both sides of the debate of whatever the difficult issue is, and and force them to think through, not force them, and help them to think through some of these ideas and where they're drawing these ideas from. So I think what I have found is that people in some Anglican churches are quite good at giving you their answers, but they're like almost like they've read it somewhere and they regurgitate the answer. But so that's something I find. I want you to be able to go to the scriptures. I want you to be able to go through history, be able to show where this idea has emerged from, and I want you to be able to pull together some different ideas, not in a binary way, but just to be able to enter the conversation thoughtfully.
I appreciate that. I think that's great. As we sort of somewhat begin to land the plane and put our carriage trays up and all that kind of thing, are there particular things you're getting ready to or excited about? This semester is just finishing, but looking ahead, as people who might be thinking, I want to take some classes, is there anything you're gearing up to teach that you are excited about or want to shout out, or just a general plug for getting interested in thinking about the Bible in a class setting?
Well, I'm teaching one of my favorite classes at the beginning of next year called Greek 1. I absolutely love it. I know that some people would be like, I'd never want to take a language, but it's really, really fun, and I love teaching Greek and I loved learning Greek, and it's not as hard as people think. That's like genuinely a really fun class. I love teaching that. I'm also teaching a class on the Gospels, on the Synoptic Gospels, and I think the lectionary year will be Luke. So, and Luke is actually one of the books that I'm starting to move into now in my research. So I'm so excited to teach that because I've been reading a lot and thinking a lot about Luke, and particularly sort of social justice stuff, but also like the women and the minorities and things like that in Luke. I'm really interested in that. Hence the fact where I said I've kind of paused the other stuff because now my brain's jumped over somewhere else. Really excited about that, and then I'm teaching a third year class as well on Judaism and early Christianity, and it's kind of looking at those books in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which I absolutely love, because I think that in a lot of traditional Bible colleges they don't really do that part of the canon, but it's so important for understanding the context of the Bible, sort of the context of the New Testament. It kind of sets the stage for what you do in the New Testament. So I love that class. But if you've never taken any subjects before, in the second half of every single year, so semester 2, we always teach Introduction to New Testament. And I just taught that this semester, and it was so fun. I did one online. Oh, actually, I did both online, didn't I, because of COVID? But one was an intensive and one was week to week, and it was great. It was really, really fun.
I've definitely, the appeal of doing that Judaism and early Christianity course, like particularly looking at those. I remember a past guest of the show, Daniel Kirk, making a case. They're so hard to understand, kind of so any kind of like so many of the Christological imagery and soteriological language is just so indebted to like books in that era.
Absolutely. Like you think about Revelation, Jude himself, even some of the gospel languages, like there's so much in there that you just, really comes to life when you understand that world of which was what they were reading. You know what I mean? Like that was their bread and butter, so to speak, like that was their whole worldview. So it's a shame that it doesn't get studied more. So I recommend that.
That's great. Well, Ali, thank you for joining us on the podcast today, and hopefully, I'm excited by what you're talking about, looking at in Luke, and maybe we'll get again to talk Luke at some point. Maybe we can even time that out sometime to help some preachers along in there as the lectionary moves into it. But I really appreciate this conversation and what you're doing, and so I hope you thanks for joining us. Anything else you want to quickly promote or plug or anything?
No, nothing. I've got nothing. I'm just thank you for having me. It was great. And honestly, like I think one of the things that I love about and often say to students is that, you know, you don't need to want to at the end be a minister or anything like that to study the Bible. Like, as I said before, as Christians, like this just it transforms your own heart. It transforms how you do, you know, how you serve in your community, how you love your family. Like, I feel like it's one of those things that basically any Christian can go and study the Bible and you won't regret it. So yeah, come join us.
I love it. What a pitch. What a pitch. Thank you so much. That's
no
wonderful.
worries. Thanks,
All right,
Liam.
folks, we'll see you next week. Bye.